Hey there, this is a quick introduction to SPSS for sociology and anthropology students at Trinity University. So when you first open SPSS, you'll see this screen here, which includes some information about new things that SPSS is doing, some help and support, some tutorials, and some recent files that you've opened. Right? I'm going to close this out and sort of look at the general SPSS screen here. So this is actually the variable view of SPSS. There's these two little toggle switches at the bottom. I'm going to go into the data view for a minute. So the data view looks basically like an Excel spreadsheet. Each row is going to be an individual unit of analysis or person. Each column is going to be a variable or some quality about that person, and it'll look a lot like an Excel spreadsheet, just a little bit more complicated. One of the differences is that instead of writing a bunch of stuff in the top column here about what the variable is, we have a whole variable view section that keeps track of information about your variable. Over here you'll find the name of your variable, a label, which is the full explanation of what the variable is about, some of the values, because it's better for SPSS if we use numbers to represent how people answered a certain question on a survey, and some examples of missing values of times when people didn't answer the question. I'm going to open a new data set, so I go to File, Open, Data. So File, Open, Data. And I'm going to open this data set that actually I helped make. So this opened it automatically in the variable view, right, where I can see a bunch of the different kinds of variables that are in the study. If you notice, the names are always a really short version, right? Oftentimes they're labeled and numbered in a particular way. There's sort of like a shorthand for what that variable is all about. The label is really where the action is in terms of describing usually what the survey question is or was when people took the survey. If you notice, one of these questions is just repeated over and over again. This is what happens when you have a survey question that allows people to answer multiple things. So it turns them all into separate variables in your data set. The values tell us kind of how people answered the question. Sometimes it's very straightforward, like for something like this, that'll let us know if someone checked that they were male or man or boy, or that they checked that they're genderqueer, right? Where they get a 1 if they checked it and a 0 if they didn't. And that's a very common way of coding things. If you notice, some of them don't have a description here. It's either because they're a real number, like age or zip code, or they are something where people wrote it in. So for people who listed didn't identify with any of these things, they're able to write in their gender identity. Over here we'll see that sometimes the labels are a little bit more complicated, and that there's like, this one is like people's sexual orientation, do they identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, same-gender loving, asexual, and so on. When we're modifying with datasets, we can actually play with these and make them sort of shorthand. We might want to change it, right? You can kind of do that thing. It also has a column where there should be missing values. And so this is a data set that I'm helping make, and so there's some problem with the missing values are not filled in, right? And it tells us a bunch of other information too. If we look on the data view, it again looks like an Excel spreadsheet, where mostly it's letters, mostly it's numbers. It has things like age that make a lot of sense, county, where we've given a number to represent the different counties. This is so if we were writing in Bear County, for example, and then we like misspelled it, it would create a big problem. So it's so much better if this is represented in numbers. And we just sort of, we look through this, we can see that there's 775 variables. It's a huge data set. Something else that comes up when we open an Excel, an SPS data set is an output file. So an output file is where all of our data goes as we analyze it, right? So I might make a frequency distribution, it'll come here. don't keep deleting it. Sometimes students, they'll make a thing and they'll be like, oh, that's not what I wanted, and they'll just go and like exit out. Please don't do that. This is just one file. It'll make one output file. All of the output will go in it. If you open up a new output file while you're working on a data set, it'll just keep adding to that one. It's very handy. You can always go through and delete stuff you don't want. You can just be like, oh, I did this crosstab and I don't like it. I'm just going to cut it. You also can insert things like a new title. Be like, oh, output file 1, my first pass at my report. And you can also move things around. It'll have all a sort of a table of contents over here, and you can move things around in it very, very easily. So it's very editable. You also can save it as its own file. It does not save with the data set. You have to save it as its own file, which means you can also open it as its own file. Right? If you notice over here when we did file open, one of the options was to open an output file. So you can do that. So here is your very brief introduction to SPSS.